So what happens when there's a fire burning and we don't feel the heat? We started this series, and if you are just checking in now, you can find the rest of the series and catch up anytime you'd like to, due to our archives. But we started this series with an experience with a tea kettle, and what happened was I turned it on high, and it whistled. And then we discussed what happens if, rather than screaming and freaking out or running and allowing an outer emergency experience, disruption, discomfort, inner, outer, rather than letting that be chaotic, what happens if we just mindfully go over, pick up the kettle? And how would that shift our bodies? So today, as we are concluding this adventure, what happens when the kettle is whistling, and it's whistling, and it's whistling, and it's whistling, and you become accustomed to the whistle? You become so accustomed to the whistle that you normalize it. That in your inner body temple or your outer experience, whatever it is, there is a whistle, there is a fire alarm, there is something going off, there are warning signs. There is something happening in your experience saying, pay attention, but you're just going, What does our spiritual practice have to inform us about this type of situation? Because this type of situation is part of the human condition. We can become so accustomed to dysfunction, to normalizing abnormal behavior, which, of course, in the spiritual realm, there's no such thing as abnormal behavior, right? But in our experience, we can become captive to something that if we were to awake again, we would recognize, I have a choice here. I don't want to choose this. Have you ever asked yourself the question, is this much struggle too much struggle, or is this normal? Is this what everyone else has going on, or is this too much? Maybe in your job, maybe in your workplace. Like, is this amount of unhappiness from day to day at my workplace, is this normal? And am I just going to find this everywhere I go because this is what life is? Is this level of health that I'm experiencing, health discomfort, is this normal? Is this okay, or is this kind of too much? Is there something I should do about it? Is there an alarm going off? Is this level of internal disturbance okay? So here's the answer. The answer is there is no answer. My aunt so sweetly said to me one time, a long time ago, I was in town visiting on a break for college, and I was in a discernment. Well, actually, at that time, I was in the consciousness of making choices, not discernment. I was in the consciousness of the struggle. I have to make a choice, and it's a big choice, and it could affect the rest of my life, and I don't know what the right one is. And she just looked at me and said, Ari, honey, if you want to choose it, choose it. If you don't want it, don't. And I was thinking, that could not possibly be the answer, Aunt Eileen. There is no way. Like, there's a right and a wrong. There's normal and abnormal. It's black and white. You're supposed to tell me what to do based on what you know so that I can make a choice that I'm going to be happy with. And instead, she said, so, like, chill. Sitting on the beach, I think having a Tom Collins or something like that. And she just said, do you want to keep that? I want to let go of that. It's as simple as that. And my very overcomplicated mind started thinking, could it be as simple as that? Could it be as simple as that? When do I consider leaving choppy waters for calmer seas? When do I consider leaving a house that's on fire, and rather than walking around with a fire extinguisher or putting ointment on burns or just walking around charred, when do I make a choice to create calmer waters? Not based on normal and abnormal, not based on someone else's subjective opinion of what life is supposed to be like, what the human condition or the spiritual condition is supposed to be like, but on my inner authority, my inner guidance system, that inner system of wisdom that is always, if I'm willing to ask, always willing to be with me in that discernment process, so that I don't have to live by the conditions and the framework of the world, but I can live by the breath of the Spirit. It's a big shift in a way to live. Calming the seas could mean concluding a job. It could mean completing a relationship. It could mean retiring. It could mean to discontinue enabling a child, a parent, a partner, a boss, an employee, the system. It could mean finding a new church. It could mean investing in new friendships, family relationships, putting a calm water over what is and creating what is desired. It could mean completing a habit. It could mean setting boundaries. It could mean kicking an addiction. Sometimes it means recognizing that as much as we practice, it's all inside. Yes, it's all inside, and that doesn't always mean the outside doesn't change. Amen? All the work is inside. But sometimes when you do the work inside, the outer shifts. And sometimes you're called to take action and make changes. Amen? Sometimes, in fact, that's our blind spot. Our blind spot can be, let me just do it, let me just do it. There's a tornado, I'm going to find the eye, I'm going to find the eye, I'm going to find the eye of the storm. There must be an eye here. In my spiritual practice, it's about finding the eye of the storm. I must become the eye of the storm. And you're sitting there in a tornado, right? And probably God, this is the time to hop into the God in the sky. God's sitting there going, what? Did you see? There's a sunny patch that way. Go forth, sweet one. Are we willing to sometimes step out of the storm? Sometimes in unity, we have such a deep teaching that is so valuable that tells us all of the work is within. That all of the work is within. And when you do the work within, then your outer experience will change. And that is true. That is true. But it doesn't change from fairies and wands. Sometimes it does. But it changes because we arrive at different places. And our discernment moves us into different experiences. Now, one of the reasons why we can have this blind side is that in unity we don't teach that there's a devil out there doing something to us. And the traditional Christian teaching is, I don't think necessarily a traditional Christian teaching, because the original, what I believe Christian teaching, is the teaching of the master teacher, Jesus the way shower, who walked an entirely different path than a lot of the, something's out to get me. But there is this idea in the human condition that there's something out to get me. Something's got me. Whether you call it an entity, and honestly in unity, whether you call it an ego, whether you call it a devil, whatever it is, it's attacking me, it's trying to get me, it's keeping me limited, it's stopping my good, whatever it is. The idea of having that and believing that and investing in that makes it so. The idea of having it, believing, investing in it, growing in it, you are feeding it, right? There is one power and one presence. It's God, the good omnipotence. It is love, it is wisdom, it is divine mind. It is like plugging a plug into a socket and going, oops, Going, I have one cord here. It's the cord of light, and I'm plugging it in. I can plug in any other cord I want. I can have that feedback going on if I want. I can do that if I want to. But my spiritual calling is to bring it forth. So something happens sometimes in New Thought teachings when we take so much accountability for all of our experiences. We can take so much accountability because we don't have that out. We don't have that something out there is doing something to me, that we can sometimes fail to hear the whistle. We can sometimes say, I need to stay in this job with this employer or in this business, or I need to stay in this field of expression, whatever it is. I can't be whatever it is that I really wanted to be because I have all of this conditioning that says, no, you can't make it, or you're not productive, or whatever it is because of that. Or I haven't seen an example of that, so I couldn't fly there, I couldn't do that. Or there are expectations of me, so this is not okay. And we put a bunch of shoulds on our reality, do we not? We put a bunch of shoulds on our experience. And even if we don't call it the devil or the adversary, even if we don't call it that, we are experiencing limitation, right? So an error thought, a limitation, the devil, whatever we want to call it, we're experiencing something that's limiting us. So when we take so much accountability, we sometimes cut ourselves short of making choices. And this is really a huge topic because it takes extreme mindfulness to discern or make choices from a mindful state of consciousness. See, anything can be used to this is just turning into a devil talk, isn't this? Anything can be used to trick ourselves into thinking that we are not doing our work. But what happens when we do our spiritual work and when we take deep accountability, and when we approach life mindfully, it's that sometimes the outer will look the same, right? We'll either stay in things or we'll leave things. We'll either keep the job or keep the relationship or keep the habit or the addiction or whatever it is, or we'll leave it. Now, just following someone else's prescription, right? To say, well, when this happens, do that. It's not going to work, right? Because someone that is an addict and experiencing an addiction mentality can't just follow what someone else necessarily said and say, oh, well, change all your relationships, cut off this, cut off that, do this, do that, because that's what I did and I got healed. Well, that is just like the little bit of toxicity that runs through religion. Like religion is all about telling stories. It's an art form of saying, this is how I became awakened. This is how I became enlightened. This is how I rose from above my carnal mind or my human self, and I rose into my spiritual experience. That's what religion is here to give us. But what can happen is we can be pointing to a direction and say, there is the answer, and then we begin to worship the thing we're pointing to. And the truth is, right, that universal intelligence is an experiential experience. It's not anything you can point to. So it's alive. It's malleable. It comes to us. That's the Holy Spirit. It's the breath. It comes to us. It comes through us. And there is, of course, there are laws. And of course, there are divine designs that we can look to. And of course, we can look to each other's experiences. If we didn't, we would fumble and fall so much more than is necessary. But we cannot try on someone's clothes, wear them, and keep, insisting that they fit when they don't. Amen? So, one of the things in Joe Dispenza's book about shifting your patterns and your habits, he says that in the back, one of the exercises is that anytime you find yourself going into a lesser state of mind or a pattern you want to shift, you're supposed to just say, change, and then you shift. Change, and then you shift. So when is it that we look at our lives and we say that? We say, change, and just stop everything and make a shift. When is conscious completion a good option? When is conscious completion a good option? Can we live a life and have discernments and do conscious completion without being a victim? Can you leave a job without demonizing your boss, the organization, the environment, the employer? Is it okay to get something and be at a point where you're just looking at it and going, I could choose this, or I could choose this? See, that's part of the spiritual work. When we're making choices or having discernments, and we're still in, there's a right and there's a wrong. I have to, and they, when we're demonizing ourselves or someone else, then there's more inner work to do. But the key to knowing when it's an outer shift is when the inner experience of something has transformed. I was talking to someone the other day who's getting ready to retire, and she was talking to someone else about her experience of getting that, because, they could keep working or they could be done. And she said, didn't you just get it? Like, I just got it. This is the time. It's going to happen. It's now. What if we didn't listen to that? What if we didn't listen to that, didn't honor that God intelligence that comes in us, that comes to us? Right? Then the victimization starts. Then the he said, she said, they did it, I did it, the organization, the system, whatever it is. We have to build evidence. We have to build a case. We have to become a victim or make a victim or persecute or annihilate. That's what happens in the mind. That's what happens in the experience in the field outside of us. We are here sometimes to calm the waters, to recognize, like, those amusement parks that have wave machines. Like, oh, there's a wave machine. It's not just that I'm in the waters of my life. There's a wave machine. It's like a tuning fork. It's in me and it's out here. It's a distinction, but it's a subtle distinction. But it is one of the most powerful distinctions in walking the human journey, in the journey of awakening. Talking to one of the live streamers this week, they referred to last week's talk and the story of Samson and Delilah, and doing their own processing. They said this: I realized I have to really pay attention and look at and ask myself, how close am I to having my hair cut off? How close am I to having my hair cut off? See, Delilah danced with Samson until the moment where she found what would make his strength cease. And Samson and Delilah not being one and another, not being a man and a woman, but being aspects of our consciousness, aspects of our experience. And you can go so micro in that to have it be in your own being, and you can also go global with that and have that be in our world. But do we stop to ask ourselves, how close am I to having my hair cut off? That could mean, how close am I to having my fire smothered, my passion diluted, my heart stomped on, my whatever it is. And when we say stomped on, we stomp on our own hearts, and then we go, stop doing it. Stop it. You can have this, or you can have this. We can all change ourselves to some extent, but we can't always change other people, right, or things in our environment. So there are points in the journey where we may be able to give ourselves permission to recognize that I've done me to the max. I've worked me to the max. There's something else going on. There's another area of my life that I need to change, adjust, explore, try, and shift. Wayne Dyer says in one of his best talks that he did with Marianne Williamson, he says, when we're praying for something and we think we don't get it, there is usually something we weren't willing to do. He probably said there's always something we weren't willing to do. So knowing when it's time to make a change. And here are some of the signs that we're in, I think, in my experience, the right ballpark. When your choice is not a reaction. When your choice is not a reaction. When it becomes a discernment, it becomes a clarity, it becomes like that example I said before of retiring. I just got this. I prayed for the wisdom and I got this. When your choice is from clarity and discernment rather than a reaction. When it is simply what is there next for you. When you're not reacting anymore, you're just responding. The second sign is when it becomes easy to take about accountability for your own actions and reactions, for your perception and for the part you play. When you have accepted how you show up in all of its strengths and all of its weaknesses, all of its positives and all of its negatives, not denying or projecting your shadow on someone else. When we're in that place, and it is so easy to go, here's my stuff, and then XYZ, whatever it is that's on your heart or on your mind. Here's my stuff. And it has become so easy to say, I get it that this is my stuff. I see that. I'm okay with that. When we're not in that place, usually we're in a fierce field of causing, right? We're in a fierce field of waking up to ourselves, that part of life where it's like a mirror. We constantly, are walking by mirrors and going, well, I don't want to see that. Oh, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see this. So then there's our vision. We're only willing to see this much. And usually someone else is in that telescope. It's someone else. It's a system. It's a political party. It's a job. It's an employer. It's an organization. Fill in the blank. It's a family member. It's a health condition. It's the moment that you got divorced 45 years ago, that your life fell apart. And of course, no other great opportunities have come your way since that second. And then when you have your spiritual awakening, all of a sudden you realize you're in the house of mirrors. In the house of mirrors. But it becomes no longer threatening to see those things. In fact, even with your shadow side, there can become a sweetness about it to go, some of this is me. I can see where it came from. I can see what kind of environment is going to help not trigger it, but help heal it or help be at peace with it. Here's the third one. When you no longer choose to be a victim. Big one. When you no longer choose to be a victim. When we're taking an outer action, but we're not willing, and we just don't even have any interest in it anymore. We are just not interested in being a victim because it's just not there. There's this perspective of like, well, that's how that is, and this is how this is, and that's how if I wanted to live in this country, that's how it would be. If I wanted to live right here, if I want to live in Colorado or Portland or wherever I want to go, that's how it would be. If I want to live here, that's how it would be. If I want to live in, whatever it is, with these people, with those people, whatever it is, that's just how it is. I don't have to make anyone else wrong. It's just a question of why am I choosing this when I could choose between multiple options for my life? Why am I still choosing this? So hopping out of I'm a victim and getting into the driver's seat of your life and saying if I want to drive into a garage full of gas and close the door, apparently I've been born with choice. Or I could go get a really cool car, open the door, drive around, go for my dreams. Live a peace-filled, centered life. Live whatever life is coming next. but I am making that choice from a place of discernment and a place of mindfulness. These keys are about 3 important spiritual practices. They're about alignment. Alignment. Am I honoring myself and am I honoring others? They're about integrity. Am I utilizing my inner authority over the external opinions and the shoulds of my life? And am I creating healthy boundaries? And for the boundaries, it's really about, am I valuing my value system? Am I valuing my own value system? Or am I trading it in for something else? 3 important practices. One of my very, very favorite all-time unity ministers and authors is the Reverend Sig Paulson. He says this: man is an unfinished product, a still growing creature, a God in unfoldment. He lives in a universe whose elements, including his own ignorance, first challenge his spirit and then yield to it. He has come through ages of bondage, ignorance, superstition, violence, and war of all kinds. He has been a bull in a china shop of creation, yielding fantastic powers destructively in a dark night of preparation to become what he really is, the self-expression of the infinite. He has lived in the hell of separation, separation from his source, separation from his fellow man, separation from the good every element of his being cries out to experience. But the light of truth is dawning rapidly in human consciousness. The light seemingly reserved for the enlightened is becoming the common or extraordinary property of all mankind. Unenlightened religion, science, business, education, society, and politics are passing into the wastebasket of discarded relics of human bondage. After ages of living on the husks of materialistic beliefs, man is finally, like the prodigal son, coming home to his self. Welcome home. Namaste.